Good morning, children. I was wondering if you have ever been asked by your parents, what are you doing? Have they ever asked you, what are you doing? Yeah, probably more than you like to say, right? Now, what does it feel like when they ask, what are you doing? Don't they probably already know the answer? Yeah? Oh, you're going to get a consequence. It's going to feel that way. I'm going to say it in two very different ways, and you tell me whether it feels good or it doesn't feel good. Hey, what are you doing? Does that sound like, oh, maybe you're drawing. Can I come draw with you? What are you doing? That sounds nice, doesn't it? What about the other side? It's like, what are you doing? That sounds like a consequence coming. You know, this is a pretty important question, and the Lord wants us to ask ourselves, what are you doing? Pretty often. And there's another question we're going to get to that comes after this that's even more important after we ask ourselves, what am I doing? So we're going to read a story, and you guys probably are familiar with the first part of it, and it's a story about Moses. Who was Moses? Does everybody remember who Moses is? Yeah, you like to? Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was born as a Jewish guy, and then he was raised as an Egyptian, and he was like almost second to the Pharaoh, and then he ends up leaving, and he goes and he works for his father-in-law as a shepherd. But then he was called by the Lord to lead the children of Israel out of slavery in Egypt and bring them to the Holy Land. Do you guys remember when did the Lord call Moses to do this? How did he do it? What did it involve? A bush, maybe? Do you guys remember this story? It was a bush that was on fire, and it was the Lord that was said to be in the bush. And he called Moses and said, you need to go back to Egypt, and you're going to help me save my people Israel and rescue them from slavery. Do you think this is something that if the Lord asked you to do it, would you be willing? It's a pretty big job, isn't it, to go to Egypt, just one person, and go tell the Pharaoh, release my people, let my people go, is what he said. Well, Moses was afraid too, and he wasn't sure how to act. So that's where we're going to pick up this story in chapter 4 of Exodus. And he's wondering, he's asking God, well, who am I supposed to tell that sent me here? It says, so Moses answered and said, but suppose they will not leave or believe me or listen to my voice. Suppose that they say, the Lord has not appeared to you. So they're saying, maybe Moses is just making this all up. So the Lord said to him, what is in your hand? Do you think the Lord knows the answer to that question? If you were holding something in your hand, would the Lord know what's in it? Yeah, because he knows he can see it. He knows. So why is he asking Moses? Exactly. And the Lord's definitely going to see it. So he asks him, what's in your hand? And Moses said, it's a rod. He said, cast it onto the ground. So he cast it onto the ground, and it became a serpent. And Moses fled from it. Then the Lord said to Moses, reach out your hand and take it by the tail. And he reached out his hand and he caught it, and it became a rod again in his hand. That they may believe that the Lord God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has appeared to you. Furthermore, the Lord said to him, now put your hand into your bosom. Do you guys know what your bosom is? It's your chest. It's where your heart is, right? So this is your bosom. So you can take your hand and put it right where your bosom is. Take your hand and put it in your bosom. And then and he put his hand in his bosom, and when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous like snow. So it's like all of the skin was dying and falling off of his hand. It's kind of gross, isn't it? It's scary. And he said, put your hand in your bosom again. So he put his hand in his bosom again, and he drew out his hand from his bosom, and behold, it was restored like his other flesh. So it got healed. Then he said, if they do not believe you, nor heed the message of the first sign, that they may believe this message and the later sign. And it shall be that if they do not believe even these two signs, or listen to your voice, that you shall take water from the river and pour it on dry land, and the water which you take from the river will become blood on the dry land. So Moses was kind of going, well, how am I going to prove to all of these people that I was actually called by the Lord? And so these were the two things that he gave him as proof. So you take the rod in your hand, and he said, cast it down onto the ground. And it became a serpent. Don't worry, it's not a live one. He's actually upside down. No, it's just a rubber one. So it became a serpent, and then would you run from this if you saw it outside? Yeah, you would run into your house, shut the door, and lock it. And then, so Moses did the same thing. He ran. But then the Lord said, no, come back and take it by the tail, and it became a staff in his hand again. So that's pretty powerful thing, isn't it? That's a pretty amazing miracle. And then the second one you said was scary too, that he put his hand in his bosom and pulled it out, and it was leprous, like, his flesh was dying and rotting and falling off. Both of these were scary. Now, do you remember the question we started off asking? What do your parents ask you a lot? What are you doing? The Lord said, what is in your hand? To Moses, right? That's kind of like, what are you doing? Because when we talk about hands, it has to do with what we're doing, because we do things with our hands, right? So that's like the Lord saying, you should ask yourself, what am I doing? And you'll probably need to remember this more when you get later in life, but it's still a good practice to go, what am I doing? Now, can you think of what, if you ask yourself when you're doing something bad, what am I doing? You might realize that it's kind of like a snake, something that could bite you, get you in trouble. That's kind of like asking ourselves what we're doing when we're doing something bad. But if we're not doing something bad, it's kind of like, no, we're doing something good and it's okay. But we should ask that question, what am I doing? What do you think the next question would be that the Lord wants us to ask? Have a thought? Just stretching, all right. What about this question? Why am I doing it? That's an interesting question. So what am I doing, and why am I doing that? Can we say those two questions together? What am I doing? Why am I doing it? Those are some really important questions, and adults, it's the same for us. We really need to ask ourselves these questions. What am I doing? Sometimes we'll recognize, no, I'm doing something good. But why am I doing it is an important question if we are doing something good, right? So what am I doing, and why am I doing that? We should always be asking that when we're doing something important. What am I doing here? And why am I doing it? You have a question? Or a thought? Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so one of the parts that makes it scary is like the snake. So if we ask ourselves, what am I doing? And it's a bad thing, that's scary, because those bad things actually lead us to that bad place you just said, hell, right? And then the second scary thing is, why am I doing it? And if we're doing things for selfish reasons, if we're doing things because we like things that are naughty, then that also is scary, and it's just like the hand being leprous, and that's a scary thing. So it's important to ask ourselves these questions, because then we can change what we do, and we can change why we do the things we do. And that's what the Lord really wants for us to do, is to always be thinking, how can I live a better life, more according to the Lord's commandments?